Have you just hired or looking to hire a new employee and you want to make sure that you set them up for success by properly onboarding them into your company?
If that sounds like you're going to want to keep watching this video because we're going to walk through a sample new employee onboarding checklist and give you tips on how you can build your own so you don't miss any steps. I'm Christy.
And I'm Mike, and welcome back to our channel where we love sharing tactical tips and best practices on how you can level up your small business.
So if you want to take your small business to the next level, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you get more awesome videos like this. Onboarding a new employee is really critical to make sure that they hit the ground running. A lot of companies invest all this time into recruiting and hiring and finding the right candidate, hiring them, and then their first day it's kind of like, hey, here's the company, figure it out.
Yeah, onboarding's super critical here. We've kind of fallen into this trap in the past where we bring people in and just let them figure things out, but it's really important that you get good at onboarding them into the company and setting them up for success. They need to understand what the expectations are of them. They need to understand how your company operates, and the better you get at delivering this onboarding process to them, the faster they're going to have the positive impact you're looking for in the business.
Right, which is important because the first day they come in, you're spending money on this employee.
That's right. They're on the clock. You're paying their salary. So you want to make sure that as quickly as possible, they're able to add value and you're able to get that return on the investment, or you're just able to overcome these problems or challenges that you have in the business, which led you to try and fill this role in the first place.
Right, and for us as a remote company, being remote has really forced us to get really good and very deliberate about putting together all the steps in place so that when we hire a new employee, they can, come in and just hit the ground running. So in this video, we've broken it into 3 parts. The first part is a checklist for preparing for the new hire. The second part is a checklist for their very first day. And the third part is onboarding through their first 3 months with your company.
The first part of our checklist is about getting ready for the employee's first day of work. All the things you have to prepare ahead of time so that when they come in, they can just get started.
So the first thing on the checklist is to make sure you have and prepare any hardware or equipment or tools that they're going to need. Macs, laptops, keyboards, pens, paper, uniform, badges, whatever they're going to need, make sure you have that stuff ready before their first day.
The next thing on the checklist is to create the list of software and accounts that they're going to need to do their job. For us, this looks like setting up their email account, getting them into Daylite, setting up their Slack account, giving them access to the wiki, all the things they need in order to do their job.
The benefit of doing this ahead of time is that means that on day 1, when they sit down, they just go through their inbox and accept all the invites. The next thing on the checklist is to prep paperwork, and who doesn't love paperwork? You want to make sure your contracts are ready to go, payroll forms are ready to go, employee benefits, whatever paperwork you need them to sign, make sure you have ready ahead of time.
Yeah, and the contract is an important one. You want to make sure you put a lot of thought into that when you start hiring people, because you want to make sure you're protecting the business. You're bringing somebody new into the company. You're still not quite 100% on them. You have to vet them a little bit more. So you want to make sure that you have the right protections there in case it doesn't work out.
Right. So for us as a company, what were some things that we had to think about and include in our employee contract?
Yeah, so for us, there's key things. For you, there might be different things. I think it's important to just be deliberate and think it through. But for us, some examples are intellectual property rights. We create software, so we want to make sure that we retain the rights to anything an employee creates on company time. Privacy and security, we store a lot of customer data, so we want to make sure that people are aware that they are responsible for keeping that in mind, privacy and security. Non-compete, we don't want people leaving with trade secrets that are ours and working for a competitor. And another thing that most businesses should have in the contract to make sure that they're open and transparent about this is the disciplinary policy. You want to make sure that you have an escalating policy so that people have a warning and eventually they need to know that their job could be on the line if their performance is not up to snuff.
Right. Good to get all those expectations up front before they're starting.
Yeah. The last and probably most important step in your checklist to get prepared for the employee's first day of work is getting really crystal clear on what their role expectations are. You want to create a blueprint that you can hand to the employees so they know exactly what you're expecting and how they can be successful at the role. I like to use the analogy of playing a sport. If you don't know the rules of the sport, how are you possibly going to win? So you want to make sure you have a lot of detail around what are the expectations for the key performance indicators or the results results you want them to drive? What are the core competencies they're going to need to be successful in the role? And what are your core values and how do they live up to those?
Right, so for core competencies, this goes beyond a job description. So for example, does this person need to be really detail-oriented? Does this role require someone to be a strategic thinker or great at planning or executing a plan? These are things that you want to identify early on. So that way when you hire that employee, maybe you see early on that they're not really a strategic thinker, and that's really critical. That helps you identify that they're not a good fit for this role. And beyond just a good fit for the role, you want to make sure they're a good fit for the company, which is why core values are so important.
Yeah, you want to make sure that they understand what their expectations are in terms of how to conduct themselves in the business. And we did a video on company culture, which talked a bit about core values. You can check that out in the description down below. So the blueprint is not only something you want to give to the employee that they can use, it's something that you're going to use. The more that you can understand your expectations yourself, the less gut feel you have to use in sort of measuring whether this employee is living up to your expectations, and will help you give coaching and direction in how they can correct things that are not going quite right. So like we said, this is probably the most important step you need in order to get ready for the employee's first day of work.
Do not skip this step. All right, so part 2 is all about preparing a checklist for the employee's very first day. By now you should have followed our previous checklist for prep so that you have everything ready to go for their first day so they can hit the ground running.
Yeah, and this really sets a great example for the employee of your expectations, because you're going to wow them by having everything ready and they're not going to miss a beat. They're going to be able to get up and running, get interacting with other employees, get their tools going very quickly, and that's going to start setting them up for success.
The first thing on the checklist for day 1, pretty obvious, give them the tools and equipment that you've prepped for them. Laptops, keyboards, iPhones, iPads, pens, paper, give them everything that they need.
The next step on the checklist is giving them access to all the software and accounts that you set up before they started. This is when you will sit them down, get them into their email, and allow them to go through and accept all those invites to the services that you use on a daily basis. Maybe think about giving them some context about your expectations around these tools as well. I've seen that a lot of companies don't tend to do this, and then you sort of get wild west in some of these different tools like Slack, for example. So I think it's important to give them a little bit of training and explain to them how the business uses these tools.
Next thing on the checklist for day 1 is get them to sign whatever paperwork you've prepped. Employee contract, benefits, payroll paperwork, whatever you have prepped, make sure they sign all the paperwork and get all that filled out.
The next step in the checklist is to sit the new employee down and walk them through the role expectations. Go back to the blueprint that you created and use that to align yourself with them on what you want to see out of the role.
Yeah, if you want to set the employee up for success and make sure that they're living up to expectations in the role, you want to go over that blueprint with them so they know what KPIs or key performance indicators they're being measured on, what results you're expecting them to achieve, what core competencies they're going to be measured on, and what core values they're going to be measured on and expected to live.
Yeah, if you do this well, then they should be able to go home on a daily basis, understanding whether they did a good job that day or not. And that's a great place for an employee to be, because then they know how to improve and get better at delivering the results that you're expecting.
The last thing on the checklist for a new employee's first day is to introduce them to the immediate people that they'll be working with, people on their team, their direct manager, and whoever they need to go to for questions. You don't want to overwhelm them by introducing them to everyone in the company, especially if you're like 10 people or more, because that can be a little bit daunting for a new employee, but just the point people and the people that they need to know that they're going to be interacting with on a day-to-day basis.
Now that your new employee has started and had their first day, it's time to go into the third part of the checklist, and this is the probationary period. And it's really important to have a checklist that keeps you disciplined on measuring their progress so that you can make a call on whether they're the right fit or not as early as possible.
Right, onboarding doesn't begin or end on day 1 or their first week. Onboarding is really that first couple of months to make sure you're doing the best job possible to set them up for success so they can be successful, and making sure that they're the right fit for the role and for the company, because the first 90 days with an employee looks the same as the first 900 days with an employee.
The first step in this part of the checklist is to give the new employee context about the company. And it's really important that you do this, because without this context, it's going to be very hard for them to be a productive contributor to the business. You want to make sure they understand some of the history of the business, some of the key challenges that it's facing right now, how they fit into the picture, and where the business is going, so that they know how to add value on a constant basis. And that's really what you want. That's why you've hired them. You want them to help improve things at the business.
So what we do is when we hire a new employee, we'll schedule over the first first week or first 2 weeks, a one-on-one with them and each kind of head of the company, or sorry, head of the department. So they'll meet with head of support, engineering, marketing, the CEO or COO, and that way it gives them an opportunity to get context around each department, where the department is focused, key challenges that they're facing, and that way they have a lot of context, so when they're giving feedback, they understand where the department is going as a whole and how the company's aligned.
Yeah, and I find that this helps bring them onto the team and make them feel a part of the family, so to speak, because existing employees have a lot of insider information sort of about the history and challenges we've been through and little jokes and stuff like that. So giving the new employees some of that context helps them kind of jive with the team better. It also gives them the sense that the top people at the company are willing to talk to everybody. They want to hear from all the employees. So when they have feedback, they feel comfortable raising it.
The next step on the onboarding employee checklist is to schedule daily check-ins. So one thing that we learned from our business coach is that when we hire a new employee, we should schedule a check-in with them every day at the end of the day for like 10 or 15 minutes and ask them two very important questions. The first is, what did you learn today? And the second is, do you have any questions?
And this is a really great opportunity to gauge how they're doing and how they're progressing. If they don't have anything really interesting to say on a constant basis, that's a warning sign that maybe they're not going to fit in here. If they have weird questions or they feel misaligned and you're not able to coach them back, then that's also a good indicator that maybe you've got the wrong person in the role. So having these daily check-ins is a really great way to sort of keep your finger on the pulse of their progress so that you're able to make that call on whether they're the right fit or not as early as possible.
The last step in the checklist for onboarding a new employee is to schedule a weekly one-on-one with them. So this is more than just that 10 or 15-minute check-in every day. This should be like 30 minutes or an hour after end of every week. And this is an opportunity to touch base with them, get an idea for how they're doing with the team, what their feedback is, and really to be measuring, are they meeting expectations? Are they living up to your core values? Are they meeting the KPIs? Usually that takes a couple of weeks till you can actually see if that's happening, but you don't want to wait for that to happen months down the road.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to pull out that blueprint and sit down with that and go through it and have that conversation with the employee around the results and the KPIs that Christy mentioned. Talk through, why are those doing really well? Where are they struggling? And having those conversations help you sort of gauge where their head's at. Are they aligned with what the business is trying to achieve, or are they going off to left field? It also helps you be very deliberate on talking through their core competencies. If they are struggling with their KPIs or their results, it's time to go into the core competencies and then sort of figure out where they're falling short there. So maybe coaching them down there will help them bring up their results. So this is a really important rhythm to get into, is meeting with them weekly.
Right, and by doing it weekly, that way you can see if they're coachable. So if they are struggling with a core competency and you're giving advice or giving coaching, you can follow up weeks after, like, are they coachable? Are they taking that advice? Or are they still struggling and they're just not a good fit?
So there you have it. There's our new employee onboarding checklist. We hope that this gave you some ideas on how you might be able to improve your new employee onboarding. And if you'd like a tool to help you manage this process, check out Daylite on our website. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this content, subscribe to the channel, click that little notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. And if you have any tips or tricks or questions, please leave them down in the comments below.
Make sure you check out the description, where we'll include a link to another video we did about company culture and how you can define your own core values. And be sure to follow us on social media, where we also share small business tips.